Throughout his lifelong exploration of the human mind, Jung kept reminding us that the truth about a person does not lie in what they say about themselves, but in what slips out from the places they cannot control. He spent decades gazing into the dark regions where people hide their fears, instincts, and the patchwork masks they use to survive. From those observations, Jung drew a piercing conclusion. To see through a person, you do not need a long time. You only need to watch two specific moments, simple but sharp enough to cut through every layer of disguise. Jung called these two moments doors that lead straight into the true essence of a person. Once you walk through them, you no longer see the calculated politeness or the roles people perform in front of the world. You see the self, the primordial core that does not need to pretend to be good, and once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. What is most unsettling is this. These two moments are always present in everyday life, yet most of us ignore them or deliberately comfort ourselves by saying, everyone has bad days. But for Jung, those seemingly small moments are actually the most honest cross-sections of the human soul. So what are these two moments? And why did Jung believe they could expose the entire nature of a person? If you are brave enough to understand these two moments, you will not only learn how to see others, but also how to see yourself. And from that moment on, none of your relationships, decisions, or connections will ever be the same. Part 1. The first indicator. How a person reacts under pressure. 1. Why Jung chose pressure as the first test. Jung once said that human beings do not truly live by the portraits they paint for the world, but by the unconscious reactions that surge up in the moments when they lose control. And pressure is precisely what makes people lose control the fastest. Nothing strips away the mask as effectively as fear, disappointment, or the feeling of being pushed to the very edge of one's limits. When life is still calm, most of us operate through the persona, the social mask carefully designed to fit in, to be accepted, to avoid being less than anyone else. But in the moment when pressure closes in, the persona is the first thing to fall, because it is only a fragile construction. The tension, the failure, the sense of threat push us out of our comfort zone, and our defense mechanisms grow weak. The mind no longer has enough energy to maintain a beautiful image. Exhaustion collapses the performance and exposes the true character no one wants to show. Jung saw this in thousands of his patients. Fear makes even the most polite person irritable. Financial pressure makes the upright person begin to lie. Loneliness makes formerly confident people become cruel to those closest to them, not because they suddenly become worse, but because the truth within them was always there. It just never had enough heat to surface. If you want to know someone's nature, watch them when they are standing at the edge of their limits, because in that moment they are no longer performing. To make it easier to imagine, picture two people standing together in an elegant room with red wine, candlelight. Anyone can be polite, kind, and gentle there. But if you want to know who they really are, replace that room with a day when they have failed, lost something important, and been cornered. Watch how they speak when they are exhausted. Watch whether they still maintain respect for others while they themselves are hurting. Pressure is the one situation that forces us to act from instinct rather than calculation. Modern psychology calls this regression under stress. When under pressure, people revert to earlier psychological states, closer to instinct, and with less self-control. What Jung saw at the beginning of the 20th century is now confirmed by brain imaging. Under stress, the prefrontal cortex, the part that governs reasoning, morality, and self-regulation, is significantly weakened. The more primitive parts of the brain, related to impulses and self-defense, become more active. This is why, under pressure, people more easily become irritable, selfish, and reveal the things they have tried to hide from everyday society. A common example, a father comes home from work in a state of stress. At the office, he manages to remain composed with colleagues, able to control himself. But when he steps into the house and the child spills a glass of water, he shouts, gets angry, and even snaps at his partner. That is not an emotional accident. That is his nature being peeled away from restraint by pressure. This is the moment Jung refers to. Who does this man resemble when under pressure? He resembles the person he is in the depths of his unconscious, not the one he tries to be in public. Or take a friend who always talks about valuing kindness and respect. When things are fine, they are full of reason and goodness. But when they face financial difficulty, they start scheming, bending the truth, and even blaming others to ease the pressure on themselves. They do not become a worse person. They simply reveal the part that was already inside them, the part that ordinary days were not intense enough to drag to the surface. Jung believed that it is precisely under pressure that people reveal their lack of inner completeness. The less aware someone is of their own shadow, the easier it is for that shadow to control them when they are stressed. A mature person, in Jung's view, is not someone who never gets angry, never afraid, never tense. It is someone who can step into those emotions and still hold on to a basic integrity. They are still wounded, but they do not use their wounds to wound others. There are also people who, when pressure closes in, become more contemplative instead. They speak less but are not rude. They are tired but not cruel. They are anxious, yet they do not betray their values. They are not perfect, but they have depth. Pressure brings out their inner resilience, the way heat brings out the gleam of steel within iron. Jung saw this as a sign that the self has begun to be recognized, that the ego is learning how to stand firm in chaos. Pressure is the first test, not because it is the most important, but because it cannot be faked. You can perform when you are successful. You can pretend when you are comfortable, but you cannot pretend when the world is pressing down on your shoulders. And this is exactly what Jung wants us to observe, not to judge others, but to understand that a person's nature always shows itself when they are facing what they fear most. And once the first mask falls under pressure, what appears next are very specific, very clear patterns that Jung believed anyone could see if they are willing to look. People cannot hide their nature when they are driven to the edge. Every expression in that moment is like a crack through which the light of the unconscious leaks out, revealing what they usually keep tucked away. The first form is the outburst of anger, not the loud, dramatic rage, but the subtle, sudden, and seemingly baseless kind. A curt reply, a heavy sigh, a sharp glance filled with irritation towards someone innocent. Jung believed that anger does not appear from nowhere. It accumulates from the parts of the ego we reject. When cornered, people no longer have the strength to shield these fragments. Anger surfaces not to attack others, but to protect something fragile within. And it is there that we see most clearly what they are protecting: a fragile self-esteem or wounds that have never healed. The second form is blame. The more afraid someone is of facing their inner darkness, the more they try to push responsibility outward. In ordinary times, they might speak eloquently about maturity and taking ownership, but once under pressure, they instantly switch. It is the fault of circumstances, of family, of fate. This is the defense mechanism of an immature ego. Jung once wrote that an unripe ego is always looking for someone else to carry its inner chaos. All you need to do is watch how they react when something small does not go their way. Do they look for solutions, or do they look for someone to blame? The way they choose tells you where they are in their developmental journey. The third form is withdrawal and closed-off silence. Not everyone explodes under pressure. Some people vanish. They retreat like a wounded animal, speaking little, interacting little, avoiding contact. But there is an important difference. Silence, because one needs space to stabilize oneself, is very different from silence used to Tao Bi. Jung said that when a person is silent to face themselves, that silence has a healing quality. But when they are silent to avoid the truth within, that silence becomes an abyss. You can see this in their eyes. The eyes of someone withdrawing to understand themselves soften. The eyes of someone running away grow colder and harder. The fourth form is the exposure of selfishness. Under pressure, Survival instinct makes many people narrow their vision to me, my feelings, my needs, my safety. Suddenly, they no longer see anyone else around them. Someone who used to be generous may become calculating. Someone who used to care for others may grow chillingly distant. Jung believed we cannot convincingly fake altruism when we are in panic. If altruism is real, it remains even in fear, even if only in small measure. But if selfishness is what truly resides inside, it will erupt in a split second before anyone can control it. The fifth form is unconscious manipulation. Under pressure, many people begin to use emotion as a tool to gain sympathy or to control situations. They may appear more fragile to draw attention. They may exaggerate their pain to receive special treatment. Not everyone does this deliberately, but Jung emphasized that the shadow has hundreds of ways to seize control. Manipulation is one of the most subtle. You only need to notice whether they are honest when they need help, or if they are performing to get what they want. Each of these forms is a small doorway into the inner world. They are not the only proof of who someone is, but they are very clear signals about what lives inside them. And if you are observant enough, you will realize that these moments often appear very early in a relationship. In those slight, stinging expressions, we do not only see others, we also see our own shadow reflected in us. And that is what Jung wants us to learn, to observe, not to judge, but to understand the nature of human beings when they no longer have anything left to hide behind. Do you recognize these moments in the people around you, or even within yourself? If you do, share a time when you were startled to suddenly see someone's true nature in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone out there needs to hear. Part 2. The second indicator. How a person treats those who can do nothing for them. Number 1. Why Jung saw this as the sharpest indicator of one's true nature. If pressure strips a person bare by forcing them to lose control, then the way they treat those who have nothing to offer them in return is the second mirror that Jung considered even more cutting. Because if in the first situation, reactions can still be influenced by fear or survival instinct, then in this second one, a person is almost completely free. And it is precisely within that freedom that their nature appears, as clear as lines carved into stone. Jung believed that when there is no benefit to gain, no status to maintain, no goal to achieve, then every action becomes a direct expression of the core of the soul. This is the moment when the persona has no reason to exist, and when the mask no longer has any purpose, people unconsciously return to the raw material within. They are kind or arrogant, respectful or contemptuous, sincere or calculating. There is no stage left, no audience, only themselves and their truth. What made Jung see this as the sharpest indicator lies in this. Most people present their best side when standing in front of those with power, or those who are useful to them. We are polite with our boss, careful with our clients, and warm with those who bring us opportunities. But the way we treat the waiter, the cleaner, the security guard at the gate, or the delivery worker rushing through the rain, is what truly reveals our nature. This is when real character surfaces naturally, without makeup. And Jung believed that it is this naturalness that is so frightening, because it shows how a person faces those who are weaker with the absolute honesty of their ego. Some people are polite to everyone, but that politeness is like a thin coat of paint. The moment they decide the other person is unimportant, the paint immediately cracks, revealing a different color underneath. Belittling, disrespect, a calm and steady arrogance. Remarks like, "Hurry up, is that really so hard?" Or those small but piercing glances of disdain. All of these are small manifestations of the arrogant shadow. The cruel part is this: they do not think they are being cruel. Jung called this moral unconsciousness, the state in which people hurt others without the slightest self-questioning. That is why observing how someone treats those who have nothing to give is the clearest way to see into the most honest part of their shadow. A person who has reconciled with their own darkness will not behave like that. They may be tired, they may be busy, they may be distracted, but they do not see others as objects, and they do not use whatever little power they have to push down those who are weaker. Conversely, someone who has never faced their inner darkness will always, unconsciously, seek to affirm their position by pressing down on those below them. No shouting is needed. Sometimes just an attitude is enough. What is interesting is this: Jung did not see this only as a sign to judge others, but as a sign of where that person is on their psychological development journey. A truly mature person does not categorize humans based on benefit. They see everyone as human. Those who live in unconsciousness see the world through a hierarchy: who gives me benefit, who does not, who can serve me, who is not worth my attention. The more unconscious they are, the more rigid this model becomes, and it is this very model that most clearly reflects their shadow. Another reason Jung regarded this as the sharpest indicator comes from his repeated experiences with patients, people who appeared kind in romantic relationships but were rude to waiters, those who seemed generous with their superiors but harsh with employees, those who spoke of compassion yet looked down on the poor. Jung discovered a painful truth: the worse someone was with the unimportant, the more likely they were to become cruel to their loved ones once there was no benefit left between them. Because their kindness was never real, it was a social strategy, not a virtue, and strategy disappears when there is no longer a goal. The final reason Jung saw this as the sharpest indicator is that it cannot be excused away. Pressure can make a good person act badly for a moment, but a lack of compassion toward those below you does not come from tiredness. It comes from the structure of one's character. No one accidentally becomes arrogant. No one unconsciously insults others unless, deep inside, there are already seeds of contempt. Number 2, Jung's reasoning and examples. And it is precisely from his observations of those who treat everyone with equal respect that Jung arrived at an even sharper line of reasoning. The way we treat the unimportant is the truest measure of character, because in those interactions all social motives vanish, and what remains is the genuine moral structure within us. Jung believed that when someone treats poorly a person who brings them no benefit, they are unconsciously revealing their true view of humanity, that people can be sorted, assessed according to their usefulness, that there are those worthy of respect, and those who do not need to be respected. This is not a conscious belief, but an attitude programmed from within, born from the arrogant shadow present in every individual. Such a person does not see the one in front of them as a human being, but as a means to an end. And once you see someone as a means, discarding kindness becomes the natural next step. According to Jung's reasoning, this quality is dangerous because it does not stop at top-down relationships in society. When you are no longer useful, they will treat you exactly as they treat those they consider unimportant. Character does not change with position. It only changes with the circumstances that expose it. Conditional kindness is not kindness. And if someone's respect for you exists only as long as you are useful, then that respect is not respect. It is a survival strategy. Jung explained that people are always consistent at the deepest level. If the root of a person is to see others as tools, then today they may be kind to you because you play an important role. But the day you no longer bring them value, that kindness will fall away like a dry leaf. You will be treated exactly as they have always treated those they deem unimportant, with rudeness, coldness, or worse, as if your very presence only slows down the flow of their life. The small details of daily life are the clearest evidence for Jung's argument. On a first date, you might see someone smiling at you, talking gently, and appearing thoughtful. But the moment the waiter brings the wrong dish, their politeness vanishes. A curt remark, a frown of irritation, a look of disdain that is not a brief slip, that is their true portrait showing through a crack. In the workplace, you might see a colleague who always acts charming in front of the boss, but every time a junior staff member asks a question, they respond coldly, as if the other person is not worth the effort of an explanation. There is nothing for them to gain, so they do not bother maintaining their image. And it is from this that you know they are the kind of person who will turn away the instant you no longer serve their interests. For Jung, all of this reduces to a single point. This is not a test of politeness. It is a test of compassion. If someone truly has compassion, it will show up even in the smallest interactions with those who cannot give anything back. Conversely, if compassion is absent, every act of kindness is just a selective choice. Thus, Jung's reasoning is not meant to label people as good or bad, but to point out the recurring pattern of a psychological law. The way we treat those who bring us no benefit is the one thing that is not distorted by social roles or personal agendas, and that is why it becomes the most honest mirror in which to see the true nature of any human being. Why are just these two things enough to see through a person? And from this sharp line of reasoning, you will naturally arrive at a bigger question. Why are just these two things enough to see through the whole nature of a person? The answer lies at the core of analytical psychology. There are certain moments in life when a human being has nowhere left to hide. The two moments Jung chose are not random. They touch the two deepest axes of the soul, fear and ego. When fear is triggered, a person reveals their most primal nature. When the ego has nothing left to expect, a person reveals their truest morality. And between those two poles, the whole personality is laid bare. Jung emphasized that we do not need a lifetime of observation to know someone. We do not need to analyze 100 situations or listen to their entire past. People expose their nature in the smallest of moments. But those small moments are the richest in information. We often think that understanding others is hard, but in reality, it is disturbingly simple. The difficulty does not lie in understanding. It lies in our refusal to believe what we see. If you observe long enough, you will see that these two moments form two blades cutting through a person's soul. One blade cuts into instinct, the other into humanity. And between these two cuts, their true portrait emerges without the need for any other test. For Jung, psychological truth does not lie in what people say about themselves, but in what they cannot manage to hide. These two situations force people to reveal precisely what they never wanted anyone to see: fear, darkness, arrogance, or the quiet kindness that was always there. On a deeper level, Jung believed the reason lies in the very structure of the unconscious. Human beings live between two forces: the ego, which wants to be seen, and the shadow, which wants to stay hidden. When everything goes well, the ego can control behavior, but when pressure comes, the shadow rises. And when there is no benefit, the ego has no reason to keep trying. These are the only two doors that lead a person back into the inner room of who they truly are. And if you know how to look, you will see the truth more clearly than any psychological test could show you. This is also why Jung said that these two things alone are enough, because they are not for judging whether someone is good or bad. They exist to help us see whether someone's nature is compatible with us, safe for us, honest with us, or not. They show us how that person will behave when life stops being easy. They show us whether we can still trust them when we are no longer useful. Part 4. Life application. The signs we often overlook. And before we step into real life, where tiny signs begin to whisper the truth about a person's nature, give me a small sign that you are still here walking along with me. If what Jung has just opened up touches something in you, leave a like or follow our channel. Not for the algorithm, but so I know there are still souls who want to look deeper into themselves and into this world. Number 1. The early signals that appear very soon. The most ironic thing Jung often pointed out is this: the signs that reveal a person's true nature usually appear very early, right from the smallest moments we fail to notice. Human beings have never been as good at hiding as they think. They are only good at distracting us with dazzling things. But if you are observant, you will see that truth always leaves faint traces, and a closer look is all it takes to understand. These signals usually do not show up in grand situations. They hide in simple, everyday moments, as ordinary as breathing, a sentence blurted out without time to think. A glance that tightens, then quickly disappears. A very small reaction when someone is faced with a minor inconvenience. Those seemingly trivial details are where the unconscious marks its territory. They reveal what is actually operating inside them, even as they try their best to keep the surface looking flawless. Some signals come from impatience. You will see it when someone shows irritation just because they have to wait a few minutes, when they frown at an elderly person walking slowly ahead, or let out a heavy sigh at a server who is trying their best. This impatience is not a simple personality quirk. It is a sign of an ego that cannot accept that the world does not revolve around itself. Other signals come from tone of voice. Not the content of what is said, but the way it is said. Some people use very polite words, but inside their tone is a quiet kind of belittling. A question delivered like a command, a request that sounds like a complaint, or a thank you that comes out without a hint of warmth. Polite on the outside, but empty within is a sign that the persona is working in place of the heart. Another signal comes from the eyes. A person's eyes do not know how to hide the way words do. You will see contradictions appear there. The mouth is smiling, but the eyes are cold. They seem to show concern, yet their gaze slides over the other person as if measuring their worth. In moments of anger, you can see in their eyes whether they are trying to restrain themselves or secretly enjoying the feeling of overpowering someone else. The eyes are where the unconscious shows itself fastest because they do not pass through the social filter. One of the most subtle yet powerful signals is the way they talk about others. In everyday stories, some people always recount the faults of everyone around them. Stupid colleagues, incompetent friends, toxic exes. The whole world is always wrong, and only they are right. This is a signal of someone who has never truly looked at their own shadow. They use storytelling to elevate themselves and diminish others. According to Jung, this is a sign of projection. They assign to others what they cannot accept in themselves. There are also signals in the way they respond to small disappointments. A plan that does not go as expected, a message that goes unanswered, something that does not happen exactly when they want. Those moments are like quick tests from fate. Do they respond with composure or with bitterness? A person with a mature inner life will adjust their emotions and recognize that life does not operate according to their will. An immature person will experience even minor disappointments as personal insults. They react strongly as if the world is conspiring against them. Another signal, subtle yet very powerful, is the ability to listen. People with depth usually listen with their full presence. Shallow people only wait for their turn to speak. If you pay attention, you will see that those who truly know how to listen do not interrupt, do not redirect the story back to themselves, and do not turn someone else's pain into a stage for their own experience. Jung once said that the way someone listens is a measure of the humility inside them. All these signals appear very early, sometimes from the very first meeting, but we often dismiss them because we want to believe in something more beautiful. We like the persona they have carefully put on. We like the story they tell about themselves more than the truth they accidentally reveal. We like the fantasy of who they are more than the reality of their nature. 2. Why do we ignore them? One reason we overlook these signs is that we are afraid of losing the image we have already drawn of them. When we like someone, admire someone, or hope for something from them, we unconsciously turn them into a symbol, and any negative signal that appears is brushed aside to protect that illusion. We are willing to make excuses. They are just tired, just unlucky, just having a bad day. We use our own kindness to cover up their darkness. Jung called this emotional illusion, where we see what we want to see, not what is actually there. Another reason is that we believe small behaviors do not mean anything. We dismiss a cold look as trivial. A rude comment was a slip of the tongue. A disrespectful act was just a bad day. But it is precisely these small things that form the real portrait. Even so, we are often fooled by our own desire. We hope they are good, so we downplay everything that proves otherwise. We also ignore the signs because we do not want to face the fact that we chose the wrong person. Admitting that the small signal is real is the same as accepting that we did not see clearly from the start. This hurts our pride, so we slow down, wait, hope they will change, or tell ourselves we are too sensitive. But the truth is, our intuition is often right from the very beginning. And yet, we stay silent because we do not want more pain, or because we do not want to walk away once our heart has already been given. Finally, we ignore these signs because we too carry darkness within us. A part of us is used to being treated badly. Another part believes that such treatment is normal. We do not realize that this normal was shaped by old wounds. When we have not healed, we easily accept things we should have rejected, and it is exactly this that makes us pass by clear signs without resisting them. Jung did not blame people for looking away. He understood that sometimes the heart chooses silence as a way to protect itself, but if we learn to listen to those small signals, we will avoid much bigger storms later. Because the truth is this: disappointment in someone rarely arrives out of nowhere. It always sends signs. We just were not brave enough to see them. Part 5. Self-reflection. Using the 2 indicators to understand yourself. But if we stop at merely observing others, we are still standing outside our own lives. Jung would never accept that. Any true observation only becomes meaningful when we turn it inward. The most important thing Jung wanted us to understand does not lie in using these 2 indicators to judge others, but in turning the arrow back toward ourselves. Every observation about people, if it does not touch our own being, remains just information. Only when we turn inward, when we dare to ask, "Who am I?" in those 2 moments, does psychological growth truly begin. We often believe we understand ourselves just because we know our strengths, weaknesses, habits, or preferences. But for Jung, a person only really knows themselves when they look at the reactions they cannot control. The 2 situations we use to examine others, pressure, and how we act when there is no benefit involved, are also the 2 most honest mirrors for us to examine ourselves. They reveal the parts we still avoid when speaking about who we are. Our shadow, our vulnerabilities, our instability, and what we do not want to admit. The first question is, who do I become when I am pushed to my limits? We may be confident that we are kind, gentle, and deep. But when pressure hits, in finances, work, relationships, and family, our real nature rises from places we thought we had under control. We get angrier, faster, we become more defensive, we are harsher with innocent people, we grow more selfish, or we shut down into a cold silence. These reactions are not sins, they are clues. If we refuse to look at ourselves in those fragile moments, we will repeat the same behavioral patterns for the rest of our lives. When we observe our reactions under pressure, we are not doing it to blame ourselves, but to understand ourselves. If we become irritable, it does not prove we are bad. It proves we are carrying a wound that has not been healed. If we lose patience, it is a sign of tension that has been compressed for too long. If we blame others, it is the ego's doctrine trying to protect something fragile deep inside. Jung did not look at these things with the eyes of judgment, but with the gaze of someone who wants to help us break out of our own unconscious loops. The second question is, how do I treat those who can do nothing for me? This is the most delicate test of conscience. Not everyone is willing to answer it honestly, because when we look at how we treat the server, the ticket seller, the cleaner, the elderly, the vulnerable, we will see what we often hide behind social politeness. We will know whether we respect human dignity or whether we respect personal gain. We will know whether our kindness is a choice or a true quality. For Jung, this is the clearest place to see whether our shadow have been recognized or is still silently pulling the strings. If we are only kind to important people, we are not kind. We are buying recognition. If we are only polite to those in power, we are not polite. We are on guard. If we are only gracious to people who can help us, we are not gracious. We are simply wearing a smooth persona. Those brief moments when we unintentionally act superior are exactly where the ego steps onto the stage, and they are the signals that it is time to start working with it. Using these two indicators to reflect on ourselves is not about looking for flaws. It is about finding our starting point for transformation. When we see that we react poorly under pressure, we know we need to learn how to regulate emotions, expand our inner space, and heal our exhaustion. When we see that we treat people differently based on what they can give us, we know we need to look deeper into the roots of our arrogance, our fear of being disrespected, and the wounds that make us want to stand above others. What is surprising is that once we start looking at ourselves through these two lenses, we become gentler with others. We no longer react so harshly to their mistakes because we know we stumble in similar ways. Understanding ourselves opens the door to compassion, and that, for Jung, is the ultimate goal, not to become perfect, but to become conscious. To be someone who knows what they are doing, what they are feeling, and why. And when we are finally brave enough to see our true nature in those two moments, the path toward becoming the most authentic version of ourselves truly begins. As Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In the end, what Jung gives us is not just two tricks to read people, but a responsibility. Once you have seen, you no longer have the right to pretend you do not know. You cannot go on choosing relationships solely because of sweet words, well-timed smiles, or perfect performances on the surface. You will begin to look deeper, slower, more carefully at how someone lives when life is not going their way, and at how they treat the small people around them. And then slowly, you realize that the most frightening thing is not discovering that someone is not as good as you thought, but realizing how many times you have betrayed your own intuition. From there, you learn to trust your eyes more than the story you wish were true. You become calm enough to walk away when you must, and clear-headed enough not to place your life in the hands of those who do not know how to cherish it.